Hey Guelph, Mark MacKinnon here, your Ward 6 councillor. Wanted to address the topic last night that council voted on, and that is the fenced dog parks that we had. So to give you a bit of background history, so it was about a year ago that staff approached council based on the numerous requests that we should be looking at putting in some fenced dog parks. We have parks, of course, sports fields and other areas across the city where dogs can be off leash, supervised when no one else is in the area, but there was a demand to have fenced areas where dogs can run off leash in a secured area where a lot of people can go and get a chance to exercise the dogs and have a lot of fun. And so that was the recommendation that came back last year, and there was 3 identified sites that should the dog parks be up. Now, we had delegations at the time, pro and against. Some best practices were looked at, and staff identified that while these 3 sites weren't perhaps the best possible sites, given that we own the facilities and that they were ready to go, that it was the best place to start. And so one particular place, Peter Misersky Park, was identified as the place to start, with 2 others, and that's on Bristol and Lee Street, would have been converted over in 2020. So in 2019, the first dog park opened, and it was a lot of fanfare, a lot of people looking forward to it, and it was very, very well used. In hindsight, maybe it wasn't the best way that we did it. Both staff and council, I think we failed in the process of community engagement, as well as understanding the longer ramifications of actually having a fenced-in dog park. So there was a lot of discussion going forward. Staff re-engaged the public on not just Peter Misersky, but also on the Lee and Bristol Street ones. And they brought forth a recommendation that council looked at yesterday, which was to remove one of the parks, the Lee Park, from consideration. And because it just wasn't considered appropriate going forward. So they said, let's keep Bristol. We're going to continue working on that. Although we are going to learn from the mistakes that we made with Peter Misersky, and we are going to proceed with that one. So that was the recommendation that staff presented to the committee of the whole. We heard some delegates, of course, again, pro and against having the parks. And in particular, we heard a lot about the impact of Misersky Park and how the fence was very close. There's a lot of noise in the area. And I don't think anyone on council could actually debate the fact that that is the best place for a park. In a lot of other jurisdictions that people I know have been to, my wife has been to, I've visited, is they have dog parks that are in remote locations that are not directly with residential properties. Because of course, if you think about it, if you're going to have dogs running and playing and barking and having a great time and lots of cars parking, do you really want it so close to residential properties? The advantage, of course, of having it in a residential property is people in the immediate community can walk their dogs there, and that's great. But of course, we know if we have one park in the city that the majority of people going to be using that park will be driving with their pets to go to that park. So advantages to having it in residential, but I think there's more disadvantages when we have that. So I went into the meeting yesterday understanding the recommendation was to keep the current one and chop one of the ones from consideration, but continue moving forward with the Bristol Street. After hearing everything and listening to my council colleagues, I did come to the conclusion that we could do a lot better. I think we made a mistake, and no one on council could justify that the current situation is tenable and is actually good going forward. Of course, if you're a dog owner, if you bring your dog to the park, it's going to be great because you enjoy doing it, you like using it. That makes a lot of sense. But it's not really the right location nor the right facility. It's too small, too close to a residential area. So the first recommendation that council put forward was to remove the second one from the 2020 planning as well. And so we agreed to that Lee Street should not be part of that based on the community feedback, based on the geographic layout of the park, and maybe that wasn't the right thing. So then if we're just left with the one park, and we know that a lot of the problems is volume of traffic with the pets and the dogs, because we only have one park. And Councillor Gibson put it right. Maybe we should be looking at closing that park as well, because alleviating the problems with the park would happen if we opened up 2 or 3 or 4, and so the overcrowding and the noise and the traffic wouldn't be quite as large. But council voted to only have the one park, and I agree it's probably not the right decision. The impact on the community is greater than the benefits to dog owners for that specific location. And so as a result, the committee of the whole yesterday voted to close that park as well. So the one we had will be closed, and the 2 going forward would not happen. Now, that's assuming, of course, that council agrees with the committee of the whole recommendation. So that'll be forward to the end of the month. And councillors, we love to hear feedback from residents. What do you think? Do you like the park? Should it stay open? Should it stay closed? Should we be expanding the park? So we want to hear all this feedback, and we have several weeks. That's how the committee structure works. We have the committee of the whole meeting where recommendations then passed up to council, and then in 3 weeks, council meets to debate and decide on what the recommendation was that we passed up from the committee of the whole. So please reach out to clerks@guelph.ca with your thoughts and recommendations on that. But going forward, if we are going to be in the business, if the city has decided we should have fenced off-leash dog parks, then we need to do it right. We need to find an appropriate location, an appropriate size, something that is not in a residential area, something that can really be a rallying point for people to enjoy. And maybe it's going to mean not a lot of people can walk there because we want to minimize the disruption of residents. Places where dogs can laugh or bark and the residents can interact, and it can be a lot of fun and a great place to exercise in a way that does not impact anyone's living, which is currently what's happening with the current park. So if we are going to invest in that, if we are going to move forward, then I think staff is going to have to do some work. We're going to have to identify the right place for a park. Do we have a correct place now? There is some discussion about Eastview Park and whether or not that would or would not be appropriate. So do we have current land, or do we need to invest and acquire some new land for this specific purpose? Yes, it does mean the money that we spent, the roughly $100,000 to get the first park up and running, will be wasted. And that is very unfortunate. Again, as I said, council and staff failed the public in how we approached it. There's no one in particular to blame, of course, but collectively, I think we made a bad decision. And the city is going to perhaps, if the vote goes through, fix that decision. Now, it's going to be the waste of the initial $100,000, and there's going to be more money wasted in decommissioning the park. But that doesn't mean it's not the right decision. Money gets wasted occasionally. We tried something, we failed, we learned from the mistakes, and we won't do that again. So in the history of all politicians, there's going to be times when decisions are made that you have to backtrack on because it wasn't the right decision, and this is one of those. So that's why I supported the motion to remove the current park as well as the future consideration. So if this motion goes forward and council approves it, at the end of this month, at the end of February, we will have no fenced dog parks. And there won't be one opening up in the near future. It's not going to be next month or the month after that. If we're going to do this, we're going to do it right. We're going to take the time, do our research, look at best practices, and find the absolute best facility for dog owners as well as dogs themselves. But we have to do it right. We'll wait and see what happens with that. I thought it was important to give some perspective. I could type all this out, and I looked at the amount of text that would have to be there, and I realized maybe a video was better to kind of explain the situation. So it's not unanimous. Council support was not for this. It was an 8-4 vote, 8-2 to proceed, and 4 councillors voted against it. And that vote may change. It may come at the end of the month that it flips, or it doesn't have enough votes to pass. But as of right now, if we forward the recommendation up to council and they vote, at the end of February, we will no longer have off-leash dog parks, fenced areas. Of course, the current policies about dogs running off-leash in sports fields when no one else is in the sports field, that still applies. And so that is not going to be changing. We encourage you, all dog owners, to look at the regulations on the city website. It says which parks can and cannot be used for this, which sports fields. And so it's something that dog owners still absolutely have a place to bring their dogs for a run off-leash in a controlled environment, but it's not going to be a fenced-in area. So thanks for listening. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to me personally, and I'm at mark.mckinnon@guelph.ca, or of course any of your ward councillors. This isn't really a ward issue, this is a citywide issue, and so if you are going to email councillors, I would encourage you to email all the councillors, or make sure you either sign up to delegate at the next meeting at the end of the month, or send your thoughts on to clerks. So again, it's clerks@guelph.ca. Council wants to hear your thoughts. The decision is not final, but it will be in a few weeks. So thanks for listening, and have a great day.